Take cover now! Get below deck! Move!
January 1942. The sky above the Solomon Sea is a muted canvas of gray and gold, the sun just brushing the horizon. A calm stretches across the water, broken only by the gentle lapping of waves against the sleek hulls of the Japanese fleet. Battleships and cruisers, proud symbols of imperial power, float in orderly silence, their crews performing routine drills under the early morning light. The sailors are unaware. They joke, they stretch, they polish brass and sweep decks, oblivious to the shadows gathering miles away. Somewhere beyond the horizon, engines roar, distant, almost imperceptible at first. Then, a low rumble, like the growl of a beast stirring from slumber, vibrates through the steel. In the air above, rows of B-25 Mitchell bombers slice through the rising sun, silhouettes sharp against the light. Bomb bays are armed, eyes fixed forward, hearts hammering. And then, suddenly, the sky erupts. Explosions shatter the calm. Water sprays like geysers, metal screams, and smoke rises in angry pillars. Panic spreads across decks. Sailors scramble, unprepared, terrified. The dawn, once peaceful, now burns with fire and chaos. The attack has begun. The Pacific War in early 1942 was a storm gathering momentum. Just a month earlier, Japan had struck Pearl Harbor, plunging the United States into a conflict that spanned thousands of miles of ocean and islands. The Imperial Japanese Navy, emboldened by rapid conquests across Southeast Asia and the Pacific, dominated the waters with seemingly unstoppable power. Battleships, cruisers, and aircraft carriers patrolled vast swaths of the ocean, their presence a constant threat to Allied forces. Among the most critical theaters was the South Pacific, where the Japanese sought to consolidate control over the Solomon Islands, New Guinea, and key shipping lanes. Their fleet, seasoned and well-coordinated, moved with precision. Sailors drilled, officers planned, and intelligence reports were analyzed daily. Yet, even the most experienced commanders underestimated the audacity of the Americans still licking their wounds from Pearl Harbor. The United States, by contrast, had faced its most devastating naval defeat, but its response was not slow. The Army Air Forces, still reorganizing, had developed a bold plan to strike back at the heart of Japanese power in the Pacific with precision, speed, and surprise. The weapon of choice was the B-25 Mitchell bomber, a medium bomber capable of long-range missions that, until recently, had been used primarily against land targets. Now, it would be tasked with an unprecedented role, attacking a moving naval fleet over open water. Training for this mission was intense. Pilots practiced low-altitude navigation over water, bombing runs against mock ships, and the delicate timing required for a dawn raid. Every detail mattered. Engines, fuel loads, bomb weights, and formation flying had to be calculated to the minute. The crews knew the stakes. If the mission failed, it would mean not just loss of planes, but the continuation of Japanese dominance in the South Pacific. Meanwhile, Japanese naval commanders remained confident in the security of their fleets. Their ships were fast, heavily armed, and protected by layers of defensive patrols. Reconnaissance planes flew regular circuits, scanning for threats. Yet, the early warning systems were limited, and the vastness of the ocean left gaps that could be exploited by those daring enough to attempt it. The Japanese sailors, trained to respond to air raids, had never faced a coordinated low-level attack at dawn from medium bombers operating at speeds and altitudes they had not anticipated. Intelligence played a crucial role. American planners had gathered information from intercepted communications, reconnaissance flights, and capture documents. They knew the approximate positions of Japanese vessels and the timing of their patrols. Yet translating this intelligence into a successful operation required courage, meticulous planning, and an element of audacity. For the pilots, the mission was perilous. flying long distances over water with no room for error, knowing that one mechanical failure or navigational mistake could be fatal. By the night before the mission, the tension was palpable. Pilots checked their planes in the dim glow of lanterns. Bombs were carefully loaded, instruments calibrated, and flight paths memorized. Each man understood the risk, but also the opportunity. A successful strike would not only inflict physical damage, but strike a psychological blow, shattering the perception of Japanese invulnerability at sea. As dawn approached over the Solomon Sea, the Japanese fleet remained unaware. Their confidence, built on months of victories and meticulous drills, blinded them to the approaching threat. From miles away, the B-25s climbed into position, engines humming, wings slicing through the mist. The stage was set, the actors in place, and the first act of this audacious operation was about to unfold. The calm of the morning was deceptive. Every ripple of water, every shaft of sunlight, and every shadow in the sky would soon be marked by fire and fear. The attack was not just a test of technology or strategy. It was a test of nerve for both the attackers and the defenders. The plan was daring in every sense. The Americans intended to strike the Japanese fleet hundreds of miles from their bases, using medium bombers in a role they had never performed before. Known as the early stages of the Doolittle-style raids, these attacks demanded precision, stealth, and complete coordination. Pilots studied ocean currents, weather patterns, and Japanese patrol routines. Timing was everything. Arriving too early meant being detected. Arriving too late meant losing the element of surprise. Training had emphasized low-level flying. Flying at altitudes of barely a few hundred feet, pilots had to avoid detection, navigate vast stretches of open ocean, and maintain formation under the stress of wind, turbulence, and a constant fear of anti-aircraft fire. Bombs had to be dropped at precise moments, close enough to inflict maximum damage, yet far enough to ensure crew survival. Every detail was critical. The slightest miscalculation could turn a bold raid into a catastrophic loss. Meanwhile, intelligence reports painted a picture of the Japanese fleet as formidable but not invincible. The battleships and cruisers were heavily armed, but their anti-aircraft defenses were oriented toward high-altitude threats or conventional dive-bombing attacks. A low-level, fast approach could exploit blind spots in their coverage. Communications between ships were steady but predictable, allowing planners to anticipate reactions. Yet no one could know exactly how the sailors themselves would respond under the sudden shock of attack. The Japanese fleet, for its part, relied on routine. Early morning drills and watch rotations created a sense of order, but also predictability. Crew members were confident, even complacent, in their routine. Some decks were quiet, others bustling with maintenance tasks. Sailors had become accustomed to the ocean's monotony, the constant hum of engines, and the occasional reconnaissance flight. But they were unprepared for the sudden roar of engines, the shadows of bombers, and the sudden eruption of fire and steel at dawn. From American perspective, coordination with supporting forces was minimal but critical. There was no room for error. Bombers would have to maintain strict radio silence, rely entirely on pre-planned navigation, and trust the skill of their fellow pilots. Fuel calculations left little margin for detours. Mechanical issues or unexpected weather could mean mission failure or the loss of the entire crew. As the dawn approached, tension mounted in both camps. Japanese sailors were busy with routine tasks, polishing rails, inspecting armaments, and readying the fleet for another day at sea. Far to the west, the B-25s climbed silently, engines humming with quiet menace, wings cutting through the pre-dawn haze. Every pilot, every crew member knew the risks. Yet the audacity of striking a dominant fleet at dawn, when visibility was low and the enemy's alertness was still drowsy, promised a chance to shift the psychological balance of the war. In that quiet, fragile interval between night and day, the stage was fully set. The Japanese fleet floated in apparent serenity, confident in their supremacy. The American bombers approached like ghosts over the horizon, each second bringing them closer to the point of no return. The calm would not last. The moment of action was imminent. The gap between planning and execution was closing, and soon, the roar of engines and the scream of bombs would shatter the morning's illusion of peace. For the Japanese sailors, dawn had always been a time of routine, not dread. Yet, when the first explosions ripped through the water, the human reality of war hit with brutal clarity. Sailors who had spent months in confidence and routine now faced chaos and fire. The shock was instantaneous. Men fell from decks, splintered wood and shrapnel tore through steel railings, and the once orderly fleet erupted into panic. Some clung to each other, praying, shouting orders, or frantically attempting to man anti-aircraft guns. Others froze, overwhelmed by the sudden, inexplicable violence. The human mind, unprepared for such an audacious strike, struggled to process the sudden transformation of calm into carnage. Officers barked orders, but smoke, explosions, and scattered debris made coordination almost impossible. The terror was not limited to physical danger. The psychological shock of realizing their previously invulnerable fleet could be attacked from the air, so far from land, in broad daylight, and with such precision, planted seeds of fear and uncertainty. For many, it was a profound awakening to vulnerability, an emotional fracture that would linger long after the smoke cleared. From a strategic standpoint, the raid was a masterclass in timing and exploitation of the enemy's weaknesses. The Americans knew that attacking at dawn offered the best combination of visibility and surprise. The low, slanting light created shadows that masked the bombers' approach, while the Japanese fleet's attention was divided between routine duties and watch rotations. The B-25 formations were designed to strike swiftly at low altitude, minimizing exposure to anti-aircraft fire. Pilots coordinated bombing runs to ensure multiple waves hit simultaneously, overwhelming the defenders. By the time Japanese gunners could adjust, the bombers were already gone, leaving chaos in their wake. This tactical brilliance lay in simplicity. It exploited human routine, predictable patrol patterns, and the limitations of Japanese anti-aircraft guns. The raid demonstrated that audacity, timing, and precise coordination could allow a smaller force to inflict disproportionate damage on a dominant opponent. The B-25 Mitchell bomber was the perfect instrument for this mission. Medium weight, but rugged, it could carry significant bomb loads over long distances. Its twin engines offered reliability, and its relatively small size made it a difficult target for defensive fire. Pilots could fly low and fast, skimming the water's surface, delivering ordnance with precision. Against the Japanese fleet, the B-25's capabilities were particularly advantageous. Anti-aircraft guns, optimized for high-altitude threats or dive bombers, struggled to engage fast-moving aircraft at low levels. Radar support was minimal, and visual spotting relied heavily on vigilant watch crews, who were unprepared for such a precise, early morning assault. The raid highlighted the interplay of technology and psychology. The bombers' speed and low approach not only allowed them to evade defenses, but also magnified the terror among sailors, who had no effective means of countering the unexpected threat. Here, human vulnerability met mechanical efficiency, a combination that would define the raid's impact. For Japanese commanders, the dawn attack was a sudden test of leadership under extreme pressure. Rear admiral and senior officers aboard the battleships faced split-second decisions as explosions shattered the morning calm. Signals were sent across the fleet, orders barked from bridge to bridge, yet the chaos rendered coordination nearly impossible. Experienced leaders struggled to maintain composure while balancing the safety of their ships, the lives of their crew, and the response to an attack that defied expectation. On the American side, leadership was equally critical, but in a different way. Pilots and squadron leaders had trained relentlessly for this moment, internalizing every contingency. Decisions made hundreds of miles away would determine success or disaster. Trust in planning, preparation, and teamwork was paramount. Each formation leader guided dozens of crews through turbulence, smoke, and enemy fire, ensuring synchronized bombing runs. The outcome hinged on precision, courage, and clarity of command, highlighting how leadership could shape not just tactics, but the human experience of war. From the perspective of the Japanese fleet, the attack was disorienting and unprecedented. Sailors and officers alike had never encountered medium bombers striking low over open water with such speed and precision. Reconnaissance planes had never reported formations like these at dawn, and radar, limited as it was, offered no warning. This shock created immediate tactical paralysis. Anti-aircraft gunners fired wildly. Some bombs missed entirely. Others barely grazed the attacking aircraft. Ships maneuvered to avoid damage, but sudden course changes often exposed them to additional risk. The psychological impact compounded the physical threat. Fear, confusion, and disbelief made even well-trained crews hesitate, reducing the effectiveness of their defensive systems. The enemy perspective also revealed a strategic lesson. While the fleet remained powerful, its overconfidence and reliance on routine had created exploitable vulnerabilities. The raid exposed gaps in readiness and highlighted the necessity of constant vigilance, a lesson that would reverberate throughout subsequent naval operations in the Pacific. Beyond physical damage, the raid inflicted profound moral and psychological effects. Sailors who survived recounted the terror of being caught completely off guard. The sudden roar of engines, the eruption of bombs, the screams of comrades, and the smell of smoke and burning fuel. Confidence in the fleet's invincibility was shattered. For American forces, the mission was a psychological triumph as well. Pilots returned with the knowledge that audacity and meticulous planning could overcome a seemingly superior force. The success inspired confidence, not only in their ability to strike distant targets, but also in the strategic value of morale as a weapon. The raid underscored a key reality of warfare. Psychological disruption can be as decisive as physical destruction. By combining surprise, timing, and technological advantage, the Americans turned fear into a tool, weakening the enemy before battles were even fought. Dawn had fully broken, yet the morning remained veiled in a deceptive calm. Then, the roar of engines drew nearer, the silhouettes of B-25 Mitchell bombers cutting through the golden haze. The first wave descended, low and fast, wings skimming the water, bomb bays armed and ready. Sailors, caught in the tranquility of routine, barely had time to react. The first explosions were deafening. Water erupted in columns beside the battleships, splintering wood and twisting steel. The shockwave rattled decks, throwing men off balance. Alarm bells rang, but the sound barely pierced the chaos. Anti-aircraft gunners scrambled to their stations, firing at shadows that seemed to dance and disappear in the smoke. Each bomb hit, near miss or direct, created new pockets of confusion, forcing ships to maneuver erratically in an attempt to avoid destruction. On the bridges, officers shouted orders over the din signals were relayed frantically, but the pace of the attack left little time for effective coordination. Sailors ducked under rails, grasped ropes, and struggled to extinguish fires that erupted spontaneously. Smoke mingled with the salt air, creating a haze of confusion that reduced visibility and made navigation treacherous. From the air, the precision of the attack became apparent. Bombers released payloads at calculated intervals, staggering their runs to maintain constant pressure. Explosions rocked multiple vessels simultaneously, leaving no respite for the Japanese crews. The psychological effect was as potent as the physical. Fear spread faster than fire. The assumption of invulnerability was shattered with every thunderous blast. Amid the chaos, some sailors exhibited extraordinary courage. Fire crews rushed to contain flames, gunners continued firing despite injury, and officers risked life and limb to maintain order. Yet, for every act of bravery, the weight of panic threatened to overwhelm. The fleet, once a symbol of disciplined power, now resembled a flailing organism under relentless assault. The technological advantage of the B-25s became increasingly clear. Japanese anti-aircraft fire, effective against conventional high-altitude threats, struggled against the low-flying, agile bombers. Even when direct hits were scored, the pilots' training allowed them to evade and regroup for successive runs. The attack's rhythm, rapid, precise, and unexpected, created an impression of inevitability. The fleet seemed trapped, caught between water and sky, with no sanctuary from the incoming storm. By mid-morning, the first wave had inflicted significant damage. Fires raged along decks, ships listed under the impact of near misses, and dozens of sailors were wounded or killed. Communication between vessels faltered. Panic replaced strategy. The Japanese commanders, realizing the audacity of the attack, attempted to coordinate countermeasures, but the timing and intensity of the raids disrupted every plan. The stage was set for the second wave, which would compound the devastation. The first act of the raid had already proven its lethal effectiveness, demonstrating that bold planning, coordinated execution, and technological superiority could turn the tide, at least momentarily, against a fleet previously considered untouchable. The morning's violence had shown the fragility beneath the surface of apparent strength. Sailors fought for survival, officers struggled to maintain order, and the bombers, relentless and precise, prepared for the next phase of their assault. The turning point was underway, and nothing would be the same once the second wave struck. The second wave of B-25s descended with even greater precision. The morning sun, now fully risen, cast long shadows across the fleet, illuminating ships in all their grandeur and all their vulnerability. Bombs tore through decks, igniting fuel stores, rupturing hulls, and sending sailors scrambling for cover. Smoke and flame coiled upward, blotting the sky with pillars of black. On board, chaos reigned. Fire crews battled blazes while sailors tried to maintain weapon systems. Anti-aircraft gunners fired relentlessly, but the bombers, trained for evasive maneuvers and low-level approaches, slipped past their aim. Near misses rocked ships violently, flooding compartments with water and sending splintered debris across the decks. Every explosion was a shockwave of terror, reminding the crew that the attack was no random occurrence. It was calculated, deliberate, and merciless. In one cruiser, a bomb struck near the ammunition hold, triggering secondary explosions that tore the ship's superstructure apart. Sailors were thrown overboard, some consumed by fire, others drifting in the burning water. Across the fleet, smaller vessels attempted to evade the assault, zigzagging, reversing engines, and firing at targets that seemed to vanish like ghosts. Yet the relentless rhythm of the attack left few moments of respite. From the air, the Americans maintained tight formations, executing runs in waves timed to maximize disruption. Pilots adjusted altitude, speed, and trajectory on the fly, responding to both anti-aircraft fire and the unpredictability of ocean winds. Bombs struck with calculated precision, targeting bridges, gun emplacements, and engine rooms. The psychological impact on the Japanese sailors was palpable. Each explosion, each geyser of water, each scream of alarm chipped away at morale. Japanese commanders, though skilled, were overwhelmed. Rear admiral orders attempted to restore coordination, but smoke, fire, and the speed of the attacks rendered them nearly useless. Ships collided in minor mishaps while evasive maneuvers were attempted, amplifying the disorder. Communication lines failed under the combined effect of explosions and panic. Even experienced officers struggled to maintain authority, realizing the unprecedented nature of the assault. By mid-morning, the full scope of the raid became clear. Several ships sustained critical damage. Fires burned unchecked on multiple vessels. Dozens of sailors were killed or injured. Yet the attack was not indiscriminate chaos. It was surgical, exploiting Japanese vulnerabilities and exploiting the psychological fragility created by surprise. The fleet, once confident and formidable, now faced a stark reality. Their dominance was not absolute, and their supposed invulnerability had been exposed in a matter of minutes. From the perspective of the American air crews, the raid validated months of meticulous planning and training. The operation demonstrated that boldness, precision, and timing could overcome numerical or technological superiority. Every pilot, every bombardier witnessed firsthand the devastating effectiveness of coordination and strategy, and the moral victory of proving that the Japanese fleet could be struck deep in its operational heart. As smoke and fire continued to rise from the burning ships, it became evident that the raid would have lasting consequences, not merely in terms of physical damage, but in the psychological imprint left on the sailors, the commanders, and the broader naval strategy. The dawn that had begun with calm waters now bore the indelible mark of chaos and destruction, a turning point not only in this raid, but in the broader narrative of the Pacific conflict. The fleet, shaken and battered, limped toward survival, while the B-25s, engines still hot from combat, regrouped for withdrawal. The raid was complete, but the reverberations would be felt long after the smoke cleared. The morning's events had proved a single, immutable truth. Audacity combined with planning and technology could shatter even the most formidable defenses. The morning of the attack had passed, but its impact lingered like smoke over the ocean. The Japanese fleet, once a symbol of unassailable power, now floated in fragmented disorder. Fires smoldered across decks, hulls bore the scars of explosions, and sailors, bloodied and shaken, assessed the destruction with a mixture of disbelief and horror. Casualties were heavy. Dozens of men had been killed instantly. Many more were injured, some trapped in compartments engulfed by fire or flooding. The psychological toll was immediate and profound. Sailors who had once gone about their routines with confidence now faced a stark reminder of vulnerability. Officers struggled to restore discipline, but the morale of the fleet had been fractured by the sheer audacity and precision of the attack. The damage, though not enough to sink the majority of vessels, was severe enough to disrupt operations. Fires, structural damage, and compromised weapon systems required hours of intensive effort to stabilize. Ships that had survived the initial bombing now faced the challenge of repairs while remaining alert to further attacks. The attack had exposed weak points in the fleet's defenses, gaps in anti-aircraft coverage, predictable routines, and vulnerabilities to low-level aerial assaults. Reports from the fleet, compiled in the hours following the raid, painted a grim picture. Commanders noted the effectiveness of the bombing runs, the speed and precision of the attackers, and the psychological breakdown of crews under fire. These accounts, later reviewed in Japanese naval archives, highlighted a sobering lesson. Numerical superiority and prior victories did not guarantee safety. Even the most disciplined fleet could be rendered temporarily paralyzed by innovation and audacity. For the American forces, the results were measured not only in damage inflicted, but in the validation of strategy and training. Pilots and crews returned from the mission exhausted, but victorious, aware that their daring operation had achieved what few believed possible. The raid demonstrated that morale, timing, and technological advantage could compensate for the disparities in fleet size and firepower. As the Japanese fleet regrouped, the ripple effects of the attack extended beyond the immediate physical damage. Shore-based commands convened emergency meetings, analyzing intelligence, reassessing patrol routes, and revising defensive strategies. The raid had proven that the American Air Forces were capable of striking deep into Japanese-controlled waters, a reality that demanded urgent adaptation. Amid the smoke and shattered decks, human stories of courage and loss emerged. Sailors who risked their lives to save comrades, officers who attempted to maintain order amidst chaos, and survivors recounting the horror of the unexpected assault. These narratives would later form part of the historical record, illustrating both the human cost and resilience in the face of sudden devastation. The morning's events had left the fleet bruised, shaken, and wary. Yet the larger consequences were only beginning to unfold. Strategic thinking shifted, defensive protocols were reevaluated, and the psychological edge had swung, if only slightly, in favor of the attackers. The stage was set for longer-term repercussions that would shape naval tactics and morale across the Pacific theater. The immediate aftermath underscored a central truth of warfare. Destruction is not only measured in steel and fire, but in fear, confusion, and the lessons that commanders and sailors carry forward. The raid had done more than damage ships. It had altered perceptions of vulnerability and power at sea. In the days following the raid, the Japanese Navy faced a sobering reality. Though the fleet had avoided catastrophic losses, the psychological and strategic impact was undeniable. Commanders across the Pacific realized that their dominance was no longer absolute. The assumption that the Imperial Navy could operate unchallenged in open waters had been shattered, replaced by a cautious reassessment of both defensive strategy and fleet positioning. The attack prompted immediate operational changes. Ships were dispersed more widely, anti-aircraft patrols increased, and reconnaissance protocols were intensified. Training drills were modified to include the possibility of low-altitude attacks at dawn or dusk, scenarios previously considered improbable. Communication channels were reinforced, and lookout rotations extended to reduce vulnerability to surprise strikes. Every element of fleet readiness was scrutinized in light of the raid's success. For the Allied forces, the psychological victory was profound. The mission proved that ingenuity, audacity, and careful preparation could overcome numerical or technological disparities. Pilots returned as heroes, their daring and skill validating the long hours of planning and training. The attack became a benchmark for future operations, demonstrating that precision strikes against seemingly impregnable targets could yield both tactical and strategic gains. The morale shift on both sides was equally significant. Japanese sailors, once confident in their invulnerability, now approached operations with heightened caution and a subtle fear of unexpected assaults. Among American forces, confidence soared. The success instilled a belief that bold, well-executed actions could alter the balance of power, even against a formidable adversary. This psychological edge would echo in future engagements, influencing both planning and execution in the broader Pacific campaign. Strategically, the raid revealed key vulnerabilities in the Japanese fleet. Low-level attacks exploited gaps in anti-aircraft coverage, predictable routines, and limited early warning systems. Commanders realized that technological superiority in firepower and ship armor was insufficient against an opponent willing to innovate and take calculated risks. The lessons learned reshaped naval thinking. Surprise, speed, and psychological pressure could be as decisive as sheer force. Historians later noted the broader significance of the raid. It demonstrated the evolving nature of warfare in the Pacific, where air power, intelligence, and audacity could challenge traditional naval dominance. The event underscored the importance of morale and perception in combat, proving that fear could be as damaging as bombs. Contemporary reports and survivor accounts emphasize the shock experienced by Japanese sailors and officers, highlighting the human dimension of strategic operations. By the end of the week, the Japanese fleet had stabilized physically, but the memory of the attack lingered. Commanders meticulously analyzed every misstep. Officers drilled with renewed intensity, and sailors carried the emotional weight of what had occurred. The raid had not only inflicted material damage, but had also altered the mental landscape of naval operations in the Pacific. In effect, the attack had shifted the psychological balance of the theater. The Americans had demonstrated that courage, precision, and daring could strike fear into a dominant force, while the Japanese were forced to acknowledge that their supremacy at sea was not unassailable. The stage was set for a new chapter in the Pacific War, one where adaptability, innovation, and psychological insight became as vital as armor and firepower. The fleet struggled to recover. The lessons learned and the altered perception of vulnerability set the scene for reflection. The raid had changed not only the ships and sailors involved, but the broader understanding of how warfare could be fought and won in the vast expanse of the Pacific. The dawn attack on the Japanese fleet was more than a tactical operation. It was a revelation of the evolving nature of warfare. In the span of a few hours, what had once seemed invincible was rendered vulnerable, not just physically, but psychologically. The raid underscored a timeless truth. In war, audacity, preparation, and human courage can redefine the battlefield. For the sailors who survived, the memory lingered like a shadow over the ocean. Some recalled the roar of engines, the whistling of bombs, and the flames that rose against the morning sky. Others remembered the courage of comrades, the officers who guided them through chaos, and the small acts of heroism that turned panic into fleeting order. These human experiences, intimate and harrowing, reveal that history is not merely recorded in ships sunk or bombs dropped, but in the lives and emotions of those who endure it. From a strategic perspective, the raid highlighted the power of innovation over sheer strength. Technology, planning, and timing combined to overcome a fleet that had long been seen as untouchable. It was also a reminder of the fragile line between confidence and complacency. Routine, overconfidence, and underestimation of an opponent can render even the most formidable force vulnerable to unexpected audacity. In the broader sweep of history, the attack serves as a testament to the interplay of courage, skill, and human psychology. It influenced naval strategy, reshaped perceptions of vulnerability, and demonstrated that warfare is as much a battle of minds as of metal. The Pacific War would continue, but the lesson remained clear. Dominance is never absolute, and every victory carries within it the seeds of change. As the smoke cleared over the Solomon Sea, the horizon once again held the quiet promise of dawn. Yet that morning would never be forgotten, not for the destruction wrought, but for the courage displayed, the fears confronted, and the enduring reminder that history is shaped in the fleeting moments when ordinary men face extraordinary circumstances.